I don't like that. I don't That's why I don't have that stuff in my house, and I don't have it activated on my computer or whatever.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't like the whole listening to everything you say all the time concept. At least we have that choice, because in the 1984 world, like what do they call them? Speak rights, or the like telespeaks. They're just in every house. They're in every room. Big Brother's watching you all the time. You can't just like hit the
Yeah.
off switch like we can.
Yeah. And like even
Well,
like, no, go Melissa.
you
Go.
never know. Our TVs might be doing that. There's like some of them have the little cameras on them too, and
Exactly.
you never know.
Yeah. Or even
and even like Xbox and PlayStation.
Yeah,
the cameras on those.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But because like even internet activity, like there was like, even like a case just a couple years ago against the government because they were eavesdropping on people, or even like Comcast and like all these internet providers, like they're like user data, like they're taking, like even if it's not your voice they're recording, there's data that they're mining on us or using us for ulterior motives that we're not aware of.
Well, and then they sell it and they profit off of it.
Right, they make
because
profit off of it. Yeah.
if they know the way that we think and the websites that we visit, then they can manipulate us to buy Victory Gin or, whatever.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being told though what time to get up and then have to exercise, and then hey, you're not doing it well enough?
She calls him out specifically out of the group of like however many thousands or millions of people are exercising. She calls him out in his living room.
Yeah.
It's eerie. When I read that, like my hair stood up. I was like, that's kind of gross feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the thing with that too, because like what if he didn't, because it's touching his toes, right? What if he wasn't able to touch his toes? Because
right.
And it says in the book, like, right, they don't look for reasons to keep people alive, they look for reasons to exterminate people. And so would that itself be a reason? Like if he's not physically fit enough to touch his toes, because it even said I think it was like between the ages of 30 and 45 you ought to be able to do this. So it seems like different age groups have different criteria for, hey, this age group should be able to do this age group. And if you're not within the parameters of your own age group, is it like,
are you going to get disappeared or unpersoned?
Yeah. Like what?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, and that kind of leads to like another thing that he talks about. There's this like ideal party look, ideal body, tall, muscular, blonde hair, blue eyes. And like, that's kind of what he lists in the book. And he sort of looks around the department where he works and he's like, none of these people look like this. Like they're all kind of like short, stout, wiry, their hairs are the wrong color. And he's like, so where does the party get the idea for these standards?
Yeah.
Well, it's probably just because those are the people that actually will follow suit and do what they're told, but the stout ones, chubby ones.
Yeah.
And that's what he said, which was interesting. The ones that are most loyal to the party are the ones that don't match the description of the party, because the ones that, like, because you look at the criteria, it says, right, like the tall, the blonde, tall blonde,
exactly,
eyes, all of that. In the implication, there oftentimes seem like it, like this man of stature, right? Somebody of like you look at them, you're like, wow, like that. But the thing is, like in reality, to have that in the party, the last thing you want to do is stand out, because that section where he talks about that, like this, the
draw attention to yourself.
When he's talking about his coworker, who he's like, he thinks too much, he's gonna die because of this, and it's like the very ideal that the party wants is the very thing that they're exterminating. Oftentimes, it would seem.
But. Yeah, that was the lunchroom scene is really crazy as well. When they start talking about like their goal is to manipulate the language in a way that like it's impossible to have free thought.
Yeah.
No more synonyms, no more antonyms, just like what words mean and just like direct, straightforward. And I thought that was really intense because like, I don't know, just from an artistic standpoint, I feel like the reason we have so many like synonyms and antonyms and like words with slightly varying meaning is because they convey slightly different things. And like, if you don't have these multitude of tools to try to make a point or like convey thought to somebody, then it's impossible. You can't convey thought. There is no thought. And that was another one where I was reading it when I was just like, holy cow, like this is really intense, like manipulative, that this government just controls these people like this.
I actually, so to quote like what you were pulling from, he says, "You think I dare say that our chief job is inventing new words, but not a bit of it. We're destroying words, scores of them, hundreds of them every day. We're cutting the language down to the bone. The 11th edition won't contain a single word that will not become obsolete before the year 2020. which is crazy. And like, if you remember the reasoning even behind the cutting down of the words, is it so that people, I forget what he said, like, so people wouldn't be able to think for themselves, essentially, so that they couldn't do a thought crime.
Yeah.
They're trying to eliminate thought crime by like stripping down the language.
Yeah, so you can, so the only words that even exist in language are words that support the party, or words that, you know, do put up,
Crazy.
which is great, because then you don't even have the language, the ability. They're trying to erase even the ability to
Think freely.
Yeah, think freely and have a
Yeah.
thought.
That's the point of the words that are like pretty much the same, but just ever so slightly different, like bad, terrible, horrendous. They all have slightly different connotations that paint different pictures. And like, if we get rid of those, then how can we communicate these ideas to each other? Yeah, he says every concept, when we get to the 11th edition, will have like 6 forms of the word, and that's it. So you have like good, plus good, double plus good, and then ungood, plus ungood, and double plus ungood. And those are the only words that could describe good or bad in the future. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's not even a language. Like, how are you supposed to think? And then you realize the point is they're not supposed to think.
You know, which is
Can
crazy.
you imagine that? How are you today? Oh, you know, plus good.
I
I'm good today.
think
Exactly.
it's got to be the new thing if we do go back to work, right? That's
I know. Yes.
I'm a double plus good today. You
I'm
know?
double plus good today.
I'm good and I'm good.
Yeah.
So if we jump back to the beginning of the book, or actually even before before the beginning of the book, so to kind of put like, so as I think you guys know, right? You guys all, Melissa sent you that list of the 100 books you should read before you die.
Right.
Yeah.
This book was number 1, so it's at the top. I know we're only 5 chapters in, but I'm kind of curious, like, why do you guys think that book, if that ranking matters, is the, if you only have a chance to read one book in your life, why is this the one book you should read?
Well, I think it's at the top of the list because it's alphabetical order to begin with. But
Is it? I didn't even.
knowing that,
And it's a number.
That's funny.
It's a number. So it's at the top.
That's funny.
But it made the list.
Is.
That's the point.
Right.
It did make the
Well, yeah, right. Like, what's important about this book? Why is it one of the 100 ones that you should read before you die? I think it inspires a little bit of a sociological imagination. Like, it really like instills the reader with the idea that there is a capability to remove yourself from like yourself, your everyday life, and try to examine things in a way that it's like, why do we do things this way? Why are things set up the way that they are set up? Why does the government make us do the things that it makes us do?
Yeah.
And I think that's just a good like thought process to be capable of, because otherwise you just kind of like fall into a rut and follow along like everyone else does, and you're just a member of the party, and
Yeah.
nobody wants to be that.
well, and keep in mind that this book was written right before the Cold War. So this book helped inspire the Cold War. So I think that's part of the reason it's on the 100 books to read, because really it was instrumental in starting a whole revolution here in the United States and across the seas, because that's why we started fighting socialism. We didn't want this future for ourselves.
So is the
But
book
that's
written
part of
as like a
history.
commentary on communist Russia?
Yes,
I did not know that. That makes a lot of sense.
yes. And it was written a little bit before the Cold War, I believe.
Hmm.
So
I didn't know that. That's cool.
I think it's interesting that we're reading it right now, though, you know,
Yeah.
with what's going on. And it
During
makes
the
you
quarantine.
yeah, it makes you see what freedoms can just be taken just like that. I mean,
and how
it's for
quickly
our
it
own good or
happened.
whatever, but you also don't want to get in that mind frame of it is for your own good, because, you know,
This is why the party does what the party has our Big Brother loves us. Big Brother wants good things for us. Big Brother is the way.
Well, how
Yeah.
easy would it be while we're in this quarantine to completely switch what the government's doing? Change our complete system and be like, well, too bad. It's really
Yeah.
easy to scare people into getting into quarantine in the first place. So
yeah.
That's true.
imagine if this wasn't real. How easy would it be for them to completely fuck us up?
Well, and it paints another interesting parallel between what Winston's job is, like going through the fact record and editing what is real and what is not real. And like, he just dictates reality, whether it is actually real or not. Like he creates a whole person and just like gives him awards and talks about like battles that he won. And now that guy's going to be remembered forever, even though he never existed. And he like uses him to take the place of this other person. And yeah, I think it kind of goes along with what Sarah was saying, that like they sort of, the powers that be, Big Brother, the government, whatever you want to call them, have the ability to like shape the reality that we see and sort of dictate how we're allowed to react to whatever is going on in the world.
Yeah.
Because even with like, 'cause it's interesting that like, you know, you bring up like even the quarantine like today and things like that. Because like, especially like in terms of like creating history and that idea too. Because the thing is like, first off, I want to preface this by saying I'm not saying that this pandemic is fake. It's just the thought experiment on what's going on. But do any of you guys know anyone that has the coronavirus personally?
No.
I know one person who's being tested for it, but that's it.
But so, because even myself, right? Like I know like friends of friends who I've heard that have had it or being tested for it and things like that. But the thing is, think of also how easy could it be if the government wanted to create a fake pandemic, and right, because we hear stories of people, if you flood the news with, oh, this amount of people, we have cases in Spokane, we have cases here in Washington's, and yet, you know, if none of us have direct knowledge of it, in other ways, we all have secondary sources of the information, right? Media, news outlets, word of mouth. None of us have direct experience of someone who actually has.
Except now you're getting people that are going, oh, you know, I was sick, like really sick 2 weeks ago.
Well,
I bet I had it too. Yeah. That's what I had. You know, it's true.
Well, and that's what doublethink is. Like, even though none of us have encountered a realistic situation where like someone that we know and couldn't see and like touch with our own hands had coronavirus, everywhere we look and everything we hear and all anybody's talking about is everyone's got coronavirus, it's so bad. And so like, despite what we are seeing in front of our own eyes and what we think and know to be true, we have to like accept this other reality that's being pushed towards us. Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah, that's what doublethink in the book is. He's like, it's not true, but it's true because everybody says it's true.
It just never even occurred to me to question it though either, that it could just be a government, you know, everyone's saying, you know, them pushing the information out there. I never even considered it.
Well, and this goes much deeper even than this, because like in terms of, because like I think part of what this book does, and at least in the chapters that we read, it questions sources of knowledge on things that we generally take as reliable. So for example, I think all of us probably believe that George Washington not only existed, but was the first president of the United States. Why? Because some history teacher, somebody told you that. Now,
somebody told them that.
Right, and it's this, right? It's kind of like the telephone game. Like, I don't want to say it's as unreliable, but like in a sense, right? We have this idea of and the thing is anymore, especially with history, right? So we look like hundreds of years, it's untestable. There is no way, if we want to say in terms of like absolute knowledge or infallible knowledge, that knowledge that can't be doubted, there's no way to have undoubtable knowledge that any event in the past occurred, and there's no way to test it because none of us can go back and directly experience it. I don't think that's a reason to throw out historical knowledge or idea of testimony, right? I think testimony is a reliable source, but it's so easy, I think, for testimony to become askew or to be mistaken. I don't know if you guys have ever heard.
It's so easy to destroy.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just destroy it all and say, well, this is what actually happened, and which is what happened in the book. That's literally what they were doing, destroy it all and say this is how it's always been and this is how it's always going to be.
Or even some schools stop teaching certain things about history. You know, they just, there's big chunks we're leaving out of history just because, you know, this happened and it's a bigger deal than that deal. So you just might not.
We only have a year. We can only squeeze in so much.
Right.
And so, I mean, like, if these kids in these schools aren't learning our history, like what supposedly happened, even though none of us were there, like, is the history kind of being erased? Like, isn't that the same thing that happens in 1984?
Yeah. And that's and there's that famous, I forget exactly how it was, but there's that famous quote of, the victors write history, right?
History goes to the victor. I was just thinking the same thing.
Whoever wins the war, they get to write the history books. They
Yeah.
can paint it in any way they want.
We were the good guys. We showed up. We tried to help them. They rebelled. Even though in actuality, like, they probably showed up and were like pillaging and like hurting people. But since everyone else is dead, they can write whatever story they want.
Right?
Yeah.
In terms of like nations too, like when I read this book, like, is there any nation in particular that comes to mind for you guys? Like modern nation when you, I don't know, when you guys read this?
North Korea.
North Korea, right? Yeah, for me too.
Yeah.
Like I think like propaganda state, like socialist, that's North
Mhm.
Korea. What's interesting though, like in terms of like this, the victory writes history, right? Or like kind of these ideas, us Americans, like, right? Like I look at, and like we're kind of taught, like I look at North Korea and I'm like, oh, those are the bad guys, right? Like how do they live that way? How do they do that? The thing is though, the people there genuinely often believe the exact opposite. They're the good guys. We're the bad guys. But I think it's a question even for ourselves, right? Why is that the case? Because we kind of think that like, oh, like they obviously just don't know. But what if we are the bad guys? What knowledge and what evidence do we have to justify ourselves that they themselves don't have? Because if we're just relying on what the state, what the government tells us is happening in these countries, or our motivations, because I mean, even you guys, I'm sure you've heard like the conflicting motivations for like the war in Iraq, right?
Mhm.
For oil? Is it for justice and peace and prosperity of the free world? Or what's the real case? We probably will never know, but I think it's important questions for us to ask and think through though.
Yeah, and that like I said, this book, as you read a story about someone questioning why their society works the way that it does, it sort of like inspires you and leads you to the ability of like questioning why your society works the way it does. And yeah, I think you're right. Like the North Korea thing, or even like if you look at the Syrian government, like because we are raised in America and everyone around us has American thought processes and is just regurgitating American ideas all the time, we think that like Syria and North Korea, those are the bad guys, they're doing it wrong and they're fucked up, and we need to perpetuate our ideas onto them so that they can be right. But we have no idea what is right and what is wrong. Like,
Yeah. Well,
we're just told to
it-
think a specific way.
what like manipulates their mind to is like, especially in this book, is propaganda, right? There's like every day, like they have the
2 minutes hate.
Yeah, the 2 minute hate, and they have the Big Brother, right? And then they also have, was it Watson? Who's the guy they hate, the enemy? I haven't.
Oh, Goldstein. He used to be a part of the party.
Right.
Like
So
he
Goldstein's
basically
like,
leveled up through the ranks to become like a great member of the party. And
Mhm.
Big Brother was like, he's getting too powerful. He's undesirable now. And they just flipped the
it,
whole
right.
script and turned him into like a villain and unpersoned him. And he was a good guy for them for a long time.
Yeah. It's crazy, right? Like he was probably, and realistically, like we'll probably get more info as we go further through the book, but what it seems is like, man, he was actually an ideal, like the ideal guy, right? Like
He was doing everything the party wanted.
He was doing everything they wanted. He upheld their standards, but they viewed that in itself as a threat. Doing it, which is weird. Doing what they want him to do is a threat.
Yeah. Well, it's like if everyone's searching for the approval of Big Brother and just trying to make sure that they live within these like perfect guidelines that the government has laid out for them, and they're watching Goldstein nail it, like just hit every nail right on the head, then people are going to start to shift their perspective from I need to act the way Big Brother wants me to I need to act like Goldstein. And I'm sure that that's when Big Brother started to realize, oh shit, like this guy's a threat to the way we operate things. And they had to just.
Well, and then you have people falling in love with Goldstein, and if it came down to picking Goldstein's sides or picking the government side, whose side are you going to be on? So
People are
you
gonna
can't
pick
have one
Goldstein.
person who's idealized as the perfect person, because everyone
Yeah.
will love him too much.
Yeah. In chapter 1, we run into the motto of essentially the Socialist Party.
Right.
War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. And I'll type it out actually in our chat. That way you guys can look at it too. But like, what do we see? What do you guys think of that?
That one was hard for me to wrap my head around because all three of them are just so contradictory. Like, War is Peace, as far as I could get with that, was that their economy and like their supply chain in this like post-apocalyptic England is based around the fights with like Eurasia and East Asia, I think. And
Yeah.
so if there's no war with either of those fronts, then like the need for goods decreases and people start losing jobs, the economy destabilizes, which isn't necessarily true, but Big Brother is trying to paint the picture that this industrial war complex, this never-ending battle, is good for the people who live there.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I think that's really the fact that all of these really do seem contradictory, right? War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Now, some of them aren't direct contradictions or negations, but the kind of that general idea behind them, like, so let's break it down. So war is peace. I guess there's two ways in which we may want to think about this. One, well, what is this literally implying? So if we take the words for what they actually mean, what is this saying? But the second, maybe the more important way, what does this mean for the party? What is the party itself trying to get at through this idea that war is peace?
I think when you have a tangible enemy, it's easier to control your population at home. Meaning, if you are against Eurasia or East Asia, whoever is the enemy or Goldstein, it's a lot easier to be like, we're not the enemy, these people are. So you guys all need to be fighting and focusing your energy on them. So then you're having peace at home. I think that is one way to interpret it.
That's a really good point. I think if people that live in the socialist England that we're reading about in the book, and obviously their lives are really terrible because there's shortages on goods and like Big Brother's watching all the time, instead of being able to actually consciously be like, oh, hey, the government is the problem. If you're just spoon-fed this information all the time that these other countries are the problem and you believe it, then you'll never be able to like rise up and dismantle the problematic government, which is what the party wants. That's their goal.
Yeah. And because I think, sir, I think you're right. I think this idea that war is peace, that if we see it like even in this book, right, that there has to be an enemy. It's the enemy that motivates people to work, to do their jobs, to go without. So like this idea that like, right, when there's a shortage of razor blades or cigarettes, oh, it's Eurasia's fault, right? It's Goldstein. It's because of the war that this is happening. And I think it's a way to control. And I think and to use modern example, I think it's like in North Korea, we see that as well. North Korea is a very warring state. Even if they're not actively in war, they're constantly giving threats of war. Just today, I saw a headline that North Korea threatens that America will get an unwelcome Christmas gift this year. And it's like maybe there was something to provoke it, but as far as I can tell, it's like, what's provoking this? Why? But I think even in that sense, like we see that this idea of it's control through fear. In some sense, right? It's control through like, oh, if you don't do this, if you don't listen, these evil people will come and do evil things and ruin what we have. Melissa, you're quiet. What's your...
I was more thinking of the next thing. I was waiting for the next one.
Okay, let's do that one then. Freedom is slavery then.
Was it freedom is slavery? Is that what it was?
Yeah, and I think, can you guys all see I put it in the text chat. I think, I don't know if it shows up.
Oh, it popped up and then it was gone. But I don't know.
Freedom is slavery.
I was thinking with freedom is slavery, like it's almost like, well, we've controlled you so much that, you know, you can only think what we want you to think and you can only, you know, do what we want you to do when we want you to do it. But it gives you the freedom to not worry about that. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about, you know, anything going wrong because we got you. You know, it's more like that. That's thinking.
Good point.
Yeah, I was basically thinking along the same lines, like if Big Brother were to disappear one day and all of these people suddenly just had the freedom to go and do whatever they wanted, their world would melt down. They'd be like, where's the structure of it all? Like they wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to handle it. And
Like,
so,
you don't
yeah,
worry
like
about
Melissa
what you need
said,
to do later. You know what you need to do because we're telling you what you need to do. Don't worry about
exactly.
it.
And so
Yeah.
these people are free to just carefree, I guess. That's what it is. Slavery is care freedom because someone else is telling you how to live your life.
Yeah, and I think Melissa, I didn't even think that's a really good. I think it's a good point. Like the idea that, like, like, don't even think for yourself. Let us think for you. Like, let us even do that, right? You don't need to have individual. You don't need to
Freedom from the
yourself.
burden. Yeah.
Like you burden yourself. We'll take care of you, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I think what's interesting to this idea that freedom is slavery. Well, then what we ask? Well, then so what is this idea of slavery? Well, to have your own individuality, to be yourself, to think for yourself, is to be a slave. But a slave to what would be my question.
Your own existence, the
Right.
human condition.
The
I
human.
guess.
That's a good. Yeah, I think that's probably what the human condition, right? To be a slave.
Right. And so if all you're doing is sloshing down gin on your break and at lunch every day, and then you just go back and just change the truth, then like you don't have to worry about the human condition very much.
Yeah.
You just kind of get drunk and focus on your lies and go through your day-to-day life.
And that's a good point.
And acceptance too. He's accepting the fact that, well, this guy knows a lot. He's basically dead now. Like he's already an unperson. Is that what it was?
One person. Yeah.
Yeah. And he thinks of himself that way too. Like, well, I'm writing this diary or journal. That's
He's like, I'm practically already dead. It's not the
Yeah.
crime isn't writing in the diary. It's like the thoughts that exist before they go onto the page.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I love, along with that, he's always worried about his facial expression. Anytime somebody else looks at him and they make eye contact, he's like, shit, what did my face just look like? Like when they saw me, did I look like I hated my life? Did I look like I was miserable? Because if I look like that, then I'm going to get unpersoned. Like I'm screwed. Yeah, exactly.
And I think you bring up like,
Let me act
about
first, and then-
the humanity of it, like kind of that idea that like the human condition, right? It seems like the goal of the party is to just turn people into machines in a sense, right?
Like strip you of your humanity. Yeah.
Output, right? Like they don't think, don't even have pleasure, like all of that. If you can get rid of as much of that as you can, do that. You know, because it even gives that example of like the little kid, like in his fabricated story. I forget the guy's name. It was like Ogleth or I don't know, it's some weird name, right? If you remember
Right.
the fabricated story that he was writing about how to justify, what was it, the shortage of something?
It was something like some undesirable person was mentioned in a news story from like weeks ago. And so he basically had to erase that guy from facts.
Yeah.
And he just creates this new person to receive all the honors and do all the work that the other guy did. And
Yeah.
he's like, he joined the spies a year early because of a special rule, because he was such a great hard worker. And like, he was a president when he was in the junior abstinence league, and like, just makes him sound like a really, really stand-up
Goes back
guy.
to the childhood of the person, right? And he's talking about like as a child at the age of 6, he threw out all toys other than a toy gun, and
Yeah,
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 right.
exactly. Just like he makes him this ideal party member.
it was just weird because it's like, man, even from the very infancy of children or whatever, right? It's just this indoctrination. And it's weird
Exactly.
too, because like in the book, it seems to characterize that in your day-to-day life, the biggest threat to every person is their children or children in general. They're the
Which
ones that turn people away.
Scary, dude. Yeah, well, and it's just like, because you got to figure
That
kids.
happened to me.
Wait, at some point, I want to hear this. I do want to.
Well, I cracked my brand new, my husband was out of the country and I just got a new phone, and then I cracked the screen because a can fell on my phone on the counter and cracked it. And Johnny, I don't know, this was like 3 years ago, he goes, "So did mom tell you that she cracked her new phone?" I was like, I was gonna get it fixed before he knew.
You were like, no, I didn't.
Like, what? No.
Well, and I think, like you said, Cole, the dehumanization of it, like when he's writing this fictional person, he makes him out to be like a stand-up member of the party that everyone else should sort of like, not
Emulate.
necessarily idolize, but like strive to be. Like, wow, he joined the spies a year early. Like, what a great guy. And he doesn't even exist. So like in these lies, they're just continually perpetuating the control that Big Brother has by like trying to make it sound better. And it just, every time you lie a little more and stretch the control that Big Brother has, it becomes reality.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
And that is weird. And because it talked like that reality talk too, it talks about how you can't, what was it? You can't create a person. Oh, no. Let me find the quote. While I'm finding this, what do you guys think of the third one though? Ignorance is strength.
That
Well,
one
that
seems kind of.
reminds me.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, it reminds me of this quote from a book that I read a long, long time ago, that ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So not knowing things gives you this peace of mind that you can do, and you just got to do what you got to do.
Mhm.
The book I was reading, it was a World War II book, it was a Holocaust book, and it was about this little girl who didn't really know what was going on, and she was unknowingly bringing a napkin that had chloroform on it to her dad so that he could smuggle out Jews out of the country. And she didn't know. But when she did find out, she was suddenly scared and couldn't do it anymore.
She didn't have the
So
strength to do it. Yeah.
have the strength anymore to do it, because now she's looking at the guards who she's passing and she's scared of them, and they can see that she's scared of them. So for me, it's kind of like that situation. I don't know if that makes sense, but it just
It makes
reminds me.
sense.
So to have knowledge means that you can impose doubt because you question the knowledge of what you have. You question the morality of what it is that is being done. Does anyone hear me?
Bits and pieces. Hi, Thor.
Hello, how's it going, Mitch?
Hey, man.
All right, just making myself some food. Listening to this awesome intellectual conversation.
I don't know. I interpreted the third one a little more like blunt and straightforward. And like, it just literally seems like the more ignorant the population is, the stronger the party and Big Brother is.
That's a good point as well.
And I mean, like, it goes right along with like even just the term thought crime. Like, if you are trying to process information or wondering like why systems exist the way that they do, don't do that. Like, that makes you a bad person. That makes you weak. You're not conforming to what Big Brother wants, and we don't want that. Be ignorant. Do what we say. Let us think for you. Be a slave, and everything will be fine. Slavery is freedom. Ignorance is strength.
Well, and to elaborate a little bit on what you said, Mitch, think about it this way, right? Think about someone who has the utmost confidence that they will go into a situation with victory without the knowledge of the realistic expectations of what the outcome could be, right? So they go into this, they charge into this situation with full zeal, with full strength, with every intention of complete victory without questioning and doubting in themselves, because they know what everything looks like. They don't get to question themselves and think, man, should I really be doing this? Or what's going to actually happen?
Mhm.
So it's almost like a headstrong kind of strength. Like, since you don't know what the risks are, you're just going to go for it. Like, who cares if you could break your neck or lose a leg? Like, if you don't know, then those risks don't exist. You can just go for it.
That's what I was kind of getting at too, I suppose. So I think it's along the same lines as that.
And just in terms of like application to the real world, like this idea of ignorance is strength, oftentimes like in the world of academia, actually, it's weird how prevalent this is, just for the fact that if any time you try to give a talk on or speak or anything on something that's not within your area of specialty. So like, for example, like if I were to say, like, oh, hey, I read these papers on psychology and yada, yada, yada. Oftentimes the response from people within any given field, whether it be my field or other fields, they'll say, oh, you can't talk on that because this isn't your field. So rather, what you ought to do is believe what this authority tells you without actually looking at the evidence. But I think even outside academia, I think we all have beliefs that we hold, that we're told to hold, that we really have no evidence for, which I don't know if that's right. So like, I'll use my own faith for an example. There's so many Christians out there. They grew up a Christian. They believe in the Christian faith. And yet, if you ask, why do you believe it? Well, I've been told, I grew up this way. I grew up to believe this. But how is that any different from ignorance, right? It's that idea of what you said, sir, ignorance is bliss, it seems like. Or you could even flip the case, right? As probably all of you know, like I am a strong Christian, and I kind of try to flip that case on even those that don't have religious belief, on those, oh, I just believe in science. Okay, well, tell me, well, why, what about that are you saying? When you make a claim, what evidence do you have for it? Because just to say, oh, well, so-and-so says X, Y, Z, I don't care what so-and-so says X, Y, Z. What I want to know is what evidence does that person have for X, Y, Z? But I think we see that within this book as well. Of it's not evidence is something that you should not have. Reasons for belief, that's something that's, he says, is going to get you killed, right?
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
'Cause you think too much. Stop thinking about it. Because like the guy that's writing
Do
that,
what we say.
remember the guy that's writing the language, the Newspeak, the 11th edition? The guy's like, man, he does a really, like, was it Winston? Is that our character? Is his name?
Winston's the main character,
Yeah.
and then like Syne, Syne, I think, is the guy who's working on the dictionary.
So Winston even tells, or in his mind, right, he's talking to himself about Syne, and he's even saying, like, this guy's too smart for his own good, right? He's too committed to this task for his own good because he's thinking too much, right? He's reasoning too much about it. But in terms of practicality, even within our own lives, I think I find even within myself all the time, like, oh man, I'm holding beliefs that I probably really don't have good reasons to believe. I don't have good evidence.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But,
Also, just like the changing of what really happened, and him maintaining a memory of what actually happened and how things are changed, and he's questioning, am I the only one that remembers these things? Like
The chocolate ration.
yeah,
They cut
the
it
way
from
they
30 to
did it.
20, and then like the next day they're like, oh, chocolate rations have gone up 20 grams.
right?
Right.
And does everyone
like, but didn't
forget they just said they cut it? Like, they're trying to spin the story, right? Make it.
But he can't ask anyone about that. Like, didn't they just say they were going to cut? And it's like, no, Big Brother says more chocolate. That is fact. That is
right?
real.
Like,
do not think.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's weird is that
Yikes.
it seems like the book seems to imply too, like people genuinely believe that. Like it's not just everyone's being like, oh, I'm not,
I can't talk about it because I'll get on
A
person.
lot of them, they literally have like this disconnect from reality. Well, because reality is different in this book, right? Reality is what Big Brother says, but they have a disconnect from what's actually real, and so they actually believe this. Oh, it's increased. You know, there's
Yeah.
Have any of you guys read The Handmaid's Tale?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. It just makes me think of that. So I can't
It's a
wait for you.
very similar situation.
Yeah.
Oh, what was Cole? What were you saying about I lost my train of thought. What were we just talking about? The sign, and he thinks too much. Winston's talking to himself. Oh, so the neighbor, the guy with the crappy kids, and Winston goes over to unclog the sink in like chapter 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So he comes over in chapter 5 to eat lunch with Sign and Winston, and when the announcement comes on, like his eyes just kind of gloss over, and he just goes into this world where he's like, Big Brother's telling me everything I need to hear. Chocolate rations went up. We're not running low on razor blades. Like he just gobbles it all up.
Yeah.
And it's like Winston is this like rare case of someone who bites his tongue and doesn't say what he wants to say, but like it seems like everybody else isn't biting their tongue. Like they just truly actually follow along with it.
Yeah,
Or is the government so good at isolating people into
Reminds me of
thinking
another book.
they're the only ones?
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know, because there's that character, the big burly guy or whatever, that he sees during the 2 minutes hate, and they just have that brief second of eye contact where they're both like, man, the world's really fucked up. And then they both have to go back like they never saw each other. I'd like to see that evolve.
Yeah. What's it? So to do that bigger picture again. So we have the war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. So that's the party slogan, right? So that's kind of like, that's that thing that they just repeat daily, right? What within our society, if you guys, anything comes to mind, as what type of propaganda like this do we have within our own society?
I think probably the Pledge of Allegiance is the closest thing that I can think of. We set time aside for children to pledge allegiance religiously to the flag of our country and like uphold its values, which is fine, I guess, like from an ethnocentric American standpoint. that's normal. I've been doing that my whole life. Like, I don't know why.
Yeah.
But then again, if you think about it, like if we watch North Korea praise allegiance to their flag, we would be like, whoa, that's wrong. Can't do that.
Yeah. Because I guess the first question we want to ask too is the Pledge of Allegiance propaganda?
Yes.
Whether it's good or bad, is it propaganda?
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah. Probably. It's like a, you know, do what's best for America. Set your sense of self aside and like take pride in your country. And yeah, I would definitely consider it propaganda, dude. Wow, that we force children to stay in school every day.
First thing they learn oftentimes in kindergarten, stand up.
And do you know what it means?
Hand over the
Like,
heart.
That's
Bro,
the
we have a
question, right?
special salute that
No
we do
one-
to our country when we say it.
Yeah, because the thing is too, right? I mean, if we want, we can. We don't need to get into the discussion necessarily of whether the Pledge of Allegiance, if its values are good or bad. But the question that we may want to ask or maybe deliberate over is it right to indoctrinate children or people in general before they even have the ability to judge whether it is good or wrong or whether they themselves actually hold to what it teaches? Because to preface this question as well, to put it in context, I would bet that even most of us in this group, if we were to pick apart the Pledge of Allegiance, most of us probably don't even know what we're actually committing to or claiming.
Yeah. And like, I guess now that I'm older and like not in school anymore and I don't have to say it every day, when, I don't know, probably in my early 20s when I really thought about like, what are we saying? What are we pledging allegiance to? That's when it kind of clicks. You're like, wow, this is a lot. Like I'm making some hefty promises here as a 9-year-old. You know what I mean?
It's such the idea that on my very life, I
Your
make
heart,
this
dude.
pledge, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the essence of your
At
being.
least no one's
Like,
doing that though. At least they're going, hey,
Wait,
you
you're-
said the Pledge of Allegiance.
Say that again.
Okay.
yeah,
Say it again,
seriously.
Melissa, you broke up just a little bit.
Oh, I said at least no one's actually holding you to it though. Hey, you said the Pledge of Allegiance as a kid. How many times? You better
That's
do
true.
what you're supposed
Wait,
to
but
do.
wait, but it actually relates directly to 1984 in the sense that 1984 in the book it claims itself these things were not illegal. You could choose not to do these things. It's not illegal, but it's frowned upon by the party, right? It's something such that he put a word to it. I don't remember what it was or a phrase. Such that even though the party doesn't say it's illegal, it's still the social norm.
It
right?
makes you like an undesirable person.
Yeah.
Like it's
I think that
it's
is
a direct correlation to like people who don't say the Pledge of Allegiance.
right.
Like,
Right. It's like, how dare you? Like, you know,
Right.
if you say that, like people disgrace people if you don't stand for it. They're like, oh, how dare you?
Or
exactly.
even
Or
like
if
the
you
American
kneel.
flag itself, if you were to like throw it on the ground or step on it or do anything like that, it's like, you know,
right.
what are you doing?
And from a sociological standpoint, like that's just a colored piece of fabric. But because we're indoctrinated from such a young age to think that like our country matters more than all the other countries and we're so big and we're so important and we have to take pride in that, like, yeah, people lose their shit if you don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or like if a flag touches the ground.
Because what's interesting too, and a question that I wrestle with is when, like, for example, with the Pledge of Allegiance or what we think our country stands for, right? Is it the values that we're pledging our allegiance to try and uphold? Or is it the institution that is the United States of America, this entity that we're pledging allegiance to? Because I feel like most people would maybe want to say it's the values, but the question is, if that's the case, then when America breaks its own values, who do we stand with? Do we uphold those values, or do we stand with the country, the institution that
The
breaks?
republic for which the flag stands.
Yeah, because the allegiance itself is not to the values, it's to the flag.
It's to the republic,
Yeah.
the institution.
And again,
and
I
the
don't want to make it into an argument of, or a conversation of whether America is good or bad. That's not the point here. It's just to see the correlations between. I think oftentimes we're indoctrinated in certain things, whether good or bad, right? There's propaganda all around us that we're constantly influenced on that we're not even aware of. Because I think we all like to think like that we can recognize propaganda when we see it, like, oh, that's propaganda.
Yeah,
But I think
exactly.
in our own lives, right, we have so much of it that we ourselves like, oh, dang, like that's right, that is propaganda. I've always just accepted it, you know?
Well, and especially like you said, it just starts at such a young age that, you know, when you're 6 and you're learning the words to it, you don't know what they mean. You don't understand what you're saying, but like since you're doing it as a child, you just realize like, okay, this is what I'm just going to do for my whole life for the next 12 years. I'll just say this every morning.
Yeah, that's true.
It's crazy. Indoctrination.
Yeah.
Can you think of any other things that would be considered propaganda, though?
Church
'Cause I'm trying.
times. So
Church.
there used to be prayer also in classrooms. That like
Mhm.
Long time ago. Yeah. And I mean, private schools still do it.
yeah, and and again, like even though like with the like for myself, right? Like I'd agree with like the ideals behind it, and I agree with the substance of it. The question isn't whether I agree with that, but the question is it right from the very earliest of ages to try and indoctrinate children into ideologies that they really can't comprehend. So
I don't know, because it's like, what's the alternative? Like, we just don't offer them a structure, or like, would it have to be some kind of varied structure? Because you definitely, I feel like as a child during the developmental years, need to create some sort of like sense of community, like people that are important and that matter, and that like you can go to them when you need help. And in America, we, not for lack of trying, we do our best to make the community America, like relying on each other, having your brother's back, stuff like that.
I think that's a good question, because then it would seem like, well, should we teach our kids anything ever at all, right? Because then it would seem like, is everything propaganda? And maybe that's the question we want to ask then. What's the distinctive of propaganda versus, maybe we'll just say for right now, not propaganda? What makes propaganda propaganda?
I think if something is directing you how to think instead of directing you like how to question and like form your own thoughts and kind of come to your own conclusions, I think that's the difference between propaganda and unpropaganda.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree. Like the way I would like, I would think generally of propaganda as being told what to believe in with the lack of evidence, right? So such that it's not a matter of here's why you should believe something, but rather here's just what you should believe. Believe this or else, kind of thing. Rather than giving reasons as to, hey, this is why I say the Pledge of Allegiance, because I uphold this, and this, and I believe in this, and this, right? Or like or prayer, like or Christian belief or whatever it is. This is why I believe Christianity, because I think that we have good evidence or reasons for this, and this, or I find that, whatever it is. Maybe a lot of different things, and different things are in a lie. But I think we leave that out too often in our life, right? We just believe it, right? Or like there's that classic saying of, Melissa, tell me if this is true, if you've ever said it. If your kids ask, well, why should I do it? Because I said so.
Because I said so.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not saying, okay, and I don't want to say like at times it's like right, it's like your kids just need to do what you say. Like
I mean, that in and of itself is almost a form of indoctrination, because like we all learned that from our parents, who probably learned it from their parents, who learned it from and so like we from a very young developmental age are like instilled with this idea that like things are just that way because that's how they are.
Yeah.
Like,
well, see,
because they said so.
as a parent, I often give the reason. I say, no, you can't go outside, because I literally just had Johnny come down here and he was like, Mom, can I go play with my friends? And I said, no. And like, first I'm giving the reasons and I'm trying to get you to understand why I'm saying no. And Dan hates that about me, because I do give reasons, where he's like, don't give him a reason. Just tell him you said no. And that's the end of it, And I'm just like, well, I want them to know why I'm saying no. But then you get to the point where you're answering the same thing over and over. So you'll say, because I said so.
Yeah.
I said so.
At least you try.
So
Yeah.
You try to teach them that like there's reasons behind the way things are.
Because I can tell you right now, if and when I become a dad, I'm just gonna say no. I'm just gonna leave it. I'll be like, because I said so.
Because I'm the dad and I make the rules.
Exactly.
Dan says I try to be their friend too much. And I'm like, well, I just don't want to be painted as the bad guy for saying no for no reason. I have a reason. Here's my reason. But
I don't
you
think
get
there's
to the
anything
point
wrong
where
with
you're
that.
just like, no. So
It's good. It teaches critical thinking. It teaches that there are reasons behind doing things the way that we do things.
yeah. Like I'm not doing this for just to have control over you. It's for a purpose.
Ministry of Truth.
So this, if you guys are okay, like figured the next kind of place that we'd kind of look at. So there's 4 ministries within this socialist
Socialist government.
What's this government called again? I forget. It's not Eurasia.
They call it INGSOC in
That's what
Newspeak, which is short for English Socialism.
Yes. So we have the INGSOC, right? And so there's 4 ministries within INGSOC.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is then once again I think we're going to see some of these contradictory ideas, right? So peace. So did you guys all get those 4?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have the ministry of truth, the ministry of love, the ministry of plenty, and the ministry of peace. But each one of these is going to represent
It's polar opposite.
not these things, right? It seems to be the opposite. So the ministry of truth is concerned with the media, but within media, right? What does media look like in this world?
Print newspapers,
So yeah, we
but
do.
also like they have a database of the history of everything that's been printed, and they're constantly changing the historical database.
Yeah.
So they go back 2 weeks and get rid of the original print and
Yep.
then make a new one.
In that quote that I was trying to find earlier, I have it here. Let me pull it up real quick. So it said, it struck him as curious that you could create dead men, but not living ones. Comrade Ogilvy, who had never existed in the present, now exists in the past, and when once the act of forgery was forgotten, he would exist just as authentically and upon the same evidence as Charlemagne or Julius Caesar. So it's this idea that you could create dead men but not living ones, right? This idea that the past and what was true is fluid, right? You can change that. What is true is, well, what we say it's true. One thing to note here, so this is the philosophy in me. So in terms of like ideas of truth, right? There's generally 2 ways we can understand truth: as truth as being objective, or truth being subjective. When we say truth is objective, what we're saying is that truth is something outside of myself, right? Something that I try to grasp at. It's true. So if something's true, it's true for everyone. And it's either
Like gravity exists. That's
Yeah,
an objective truth.
like I either claim, like if I make a truth claim, I'm either right or wrong. Subjective truth seems to imply that you can create your own truth. It's based on the subject. It's based on me. So statements of that's true for you, but not true for me. That would be a claim of subjective truth. Within this idea of ministry of media, we have this idea of subjective truth, right? They can create their own truth. It's the subject, the person, that determines what's true in the world, not the world itself, which is interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fact that the Ministry of Truth, is that what they're called?
Mhm.
The media, they like literally just dictate reality. And that's Winston's job, is he just goes in and he goes, I decide the past.
Yeah.
Like whatever they tell me to change and whatever they don't like, I fix it. And I make the past better than it actually is.
Yeah. It's weird. It's kind of, and it makes me wonder too, and what you would never know, things in our past that we now hold are true that aren't. Like, has history been changed? It probably has, and would we ever know? I don't know. You know?
I think a good example of that is the way that American history talks about Native Americans.
Yeah.
And how it just kind of breezes over a lot of stuff. They're like, oh, the Trail of Tears existed, and we just made them go from Ohio all the way across the country, and a lot of people died. And then you turn the page, and you're not talking about Native Americans anymore. And so, like, since the Europeans came and wiped out Native Americans, history went to the victors. Like, the white man gets to tell the story of what happened to the natives because most of the natives are gone.
That starts tomorrow, but it takes a week for that.
Okay.
Yeah. Or they don't have like written documentation from the natives of what happened, and they don't have their story from long ago. They just have what the Americans decided to write down.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And it's kind of like the situation with Big Brother in the book, where like if you're powerful enough, then you can decide what's true and what's not true, or what's history and what's not history.
The next one is the Ministry of Love. Do you guys remember what's that one have to deal with?
That one had to deal with making unpeople. that's the one that's in control of thought crimes and stuff like that.
Yeah, so this would be their equivalent of like their justice system, right? Kind of like the thought police and all that, and enforcing that.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that it's called the Ministry of Love. And so we think justice system, right? Inherently within a justice system, we have the word justice, right? So something that is just is something that it's right to do, right? It's the right action given this. So like, right, because we could say that even the government does unjust actions. In our government, right, we would say that the government itself does not determine justice, but rather tries to uphold justice. But within this government,
they determine justice.
Right, it seems that the government determines even the very concept of justice. Someone, if you can, someone say more about that. Like, what does that seem to get at for the way they function?
The government.
It's all
It's just-
about my way or the highway.
Yeah, more of the government exhibiting control. If
Yeah.
you know, if they dictate what is right and what is wrong, then they get to choose who to persecute and who not to persecute.
Yeah.
As opposed to it being like uniform and
Or
real.
even not even letting everyone know, like he said, like some people you thought were dead, they reappear 2 years later and they're naming all these people. So there's no real accountability on, oh, well, this person did this bad thing and so we're, they're done. There's no accountability. They're just gone. They vanish. Like he said, they vanish. And you don't know what happened to them, or specifically you don't know why,
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting. It's called the. Why do you think they call it the Ministry of Love?
Less intimidating.
Yeah. And it's
as opposed to like the Ministry of Murdering People.
Right? Well, it's interesting because I think part of it too is a redefining of what love is. Because if they call it the Ministry of Love, then the implication is that the actions that the ministry does is loving. Well, what are the actions that the ministry does? Killing, right? Making persons unpersons. Therefore, the concept of love is no longer what we would like self-sacrifice.
Right.
It's
well, I sold my mother out and I snitched on her as a thought criminal because I love her. And being a thought criminal is bad and I want my mother to be good, which is why I told the government about her so that they could take her because I love her.
Yeah.
That's a good one, dude.
Yeah.
So
they change what love means and it shifts the whole perspective. Dang, that one's a lot.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's kind of a creepy feeling too. It's just like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, that's weird. They completely, shift the meaning of the word.
Yeah, and we'll see that with the rest. So because the next ministry is the Ministry of Plenty. Anybody remember what that one has to deal with?
The economy.
The economy, right? So it's the resources, right? The distribution of the economy and all those things. But it's called the Ministry of Plenty. And yet, like, right, we were just talking about how, let me plug my computer and it's about to die, but how, like the cigarettes and like the razor blades, right? How the stock went down, but yet then they re-describe that or they rewrite history such that, oh no, it's plenty, right? So they rewrite the story so it's never a matter of, oh, we're cutting down these rations, or even when they do, it seems that they rechange the story to, oh no, we're increasing the rations when really they're taking away.
Exactly.
It's basically stating we give you what you need, but we decide what you need.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
right.
all
You get it decide.
Yeah.
Seem relevant to our circumstances, like right now, right? Government, we'll tell you what you need, right?
Yeah, right. Don't worry, the checks are coming. We're going to decide how big the checks are, but the checks are coming.
Right. Right.
Yikes.
Well, it's interesting too, because like, so did you guys see Anthony's post on the Facebook crowd? Or on
I don't think so.
Because he was talking about how he was getting interviewed by
BBC News or something like that.
Right. And because what's interesting, right, is that the media, like even in Washington, we have this idea that, people can file for unemployment. We're waiving all these fees and all that. I can't speak for anyone else, but the reality is I got denied and I tried it twice and I'm still denied on it. So like, that's cool that maybe that works for some people, but even on our Facebook group, right, you saw how many people were denied on it. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like the reality. Like the media says this is what's happening.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the reality.
Careful, Cole. Don't commit a thought crime.
I know.
The
I
media
know.
says that's what's happening. That's what's
Or
really
it's
happening.
freedom of slavery, ignorance is strength.
Exactly. You said your money didn't come, but your money is coming. That's what they
Exactly,
said.
right? No, I say it came already, even though it did.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah, it came.
I
I
must
got
have
it. I got it.
Yeah, I want it too. Yeah.
Yeah, they
And then
live
the
in a
last
world where
one-
conversations are like this are banned.
Yeah.
What's your last one?
All be arrested.
The last one was the Ministry of Peace. And then I'm guessing you guys can assume what that one has to
It's
do
the
with.
military.
The war, right?
Yeah.
This idea, which is interesting because if so we have the Ministry of Peace. And again, what's the first part of the slogan? War is peace. So this idea that the Ministry of Peace
Is the Ministry of War.
Ministry of War, right?
It gives it to you straight out, laid in front of your face.
So to be at peace is really just to be at war. And I think that's necessary for the government in this book. Because the next question I'm going to ask is, do you think there's actually a real war happening? Is Goldstein real? Is Big Brother real? Is there actually a war happening? Or is this a fabrication that keeps this...
Are there even soldiers on these fronts fighting these other countries?
Yeah, because you always hear of these, right? These victories, or often what it seems like the book will do, they'll say, "Oh, we suffered this defeat or something happened, right? So decrease in rations." But then a week later, they'll rewrite the history and say, "Oh no, we actually had this great victory, and the rations were increased,"
Even though they actually weren't.
No, they weren't. And even the question was, there even a war happening? Is this even is this a reality?
Or are they just telling them, "Oh, there's a war constantly going on, and like all we're doing is feeding them. We have to keep working, keep making sure that the enemy doesn't come."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically like the virus thing right now.
Yeah, it could be,
Well,
right? Yeah.
it's like you said earlier, if there's like an enemy for them to go against, then the enemy can't be Big Brother. So who knows? Maybe the enemy's fake.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Even
Cole.
like Big Brother, because you look at Big Brother and it seems to always just speak of, there's that still image of Big Brother, right? It's just that one image that they always have, and then you'll have like maybe like I don't know if there's voices, like the broadcasting of the voice behind or whatever, but it's always just that one picture. Same with Goldstein. It's always the one picture, right? It talks about, I think like he's like kind of the tall, pencil-y mustache, right, and all that. Like, right? Like it's not like you're seeing video reel of them. No, they just put the picture there, and that's the picture that everyone has in their house of at least Big Brother, right? They always have the big posters and all that. And what's interesting too is that this Big Brother is that he seems less of a person and more of an idol in some sense.
Like an entity.
Yeah, like he doesn't seem like a human being, right? It seems like he's almost venerated or worshipped.
Yeah, like the government as a whole is just Big Brother.
Yeah.
It's almost like Hitler, though. I mean, I'm sure during those times you saw his image everywhere.
Well, and even like Syria today, I was just thinking about that. Like there are just posters all over city streets plastered with dictators' faces on them, and slogans underneath talking about how life is good, don't fret, fall into place, do everything we say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they literally do in North Korea with Kim Jong-un or whatever his name is.
Exactly.
That's literally what he does. It's just his image, and he's God over there.
Right.
Yeah, he is. They do view him as God incarnate, which is weird.
Wasn't that kind of like the Pope in a different light? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, I would say so. I ain't Catholic.
I don't know. Grasping at straws over here.
And so what was that? I had another question for you guys. So we'll move on, but like one thing to note here, what's interesting, so we have that war slogan, right? War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. There's a lot of overlap there, even with the four ministries that they have, right? On kind of upholding of those ideals and kind of what's the redefining of terms. Let's jump back to like kind of, I think it's in chapter 1. You guys remember, what was it that Winston, what's the first crime that we see him do in the book?
right in the book.
Right.
Isn't it
Yeah,
getting-
right in the diary.
Getting the diary itself?
What did they, do you remember, what did he say about the getting of the diary?
Oh, right.
Thought
He like
that-
sneaks into a back alley bookstore and like makes sure nobody's around and does a really quick interaction and then runs home and hides it.
Was it illegal though?
No.
No.
Right? So it
Technically
says that it's not illegal. However, that doesn't seem to excuse him from a possible thought crime. Right? Because even though the physical action may not be wrong, they could implicate him saying, oh, but your actions are further representative of a thought crime. So even though, because the government's they're trying to uphold this idea of, oh, look, you're kind of free, right? Like you can make your choices. It's not illegal. We're not overbearing. But even if it's not the action that's illegal, they're just going to implicate you of, oh, but your thoughts were. So therefore, you still committed a crime there.
Yeah.
He gets the book. He goes and gets the pen with the nib and the ink. And then
Special pen.
right? Yeah, because
Yeah.
which is interesting. Because what's interesting, the book kind of throws us into Winston too, right? We don't really get any build up for Winston.
Yeah,
of
we're
his
just-
life and how he was always like following the grain. We're just thrown in right at the beginning of he commits a crime. So it's like-
Someday he's 35 years old. We know nothing about this man. We've never seen his life. And it's like, boom, welcome to 1984. Here's your main character.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like, well, what about his past? Like earlier in life, did he have the same mindset before, or like he just
Yeah.
did his mind just like spark today, and now he's like clear and like I see this is all a fabrication, like
Mm-hmm.
what's going on?
Well, and it talks about his parents a little bit. Like he says he remembers his mom dying at a really young age, and then something about like being taken from his dad to join the spies, and like that's pretty much it.
What's the crime? So let's go back to his him writing in the book. What's the crime there? So I mean, it's a thought crime, but like, what's further? Why is that a crime?
He's expressing his thoughts. You're not supposed to have thoughts. You're supposed to
Do what Big
not
Brother
go
says.
into the brain. Not big picture, just the slavery of your mind.
Yeah, he's showing individualism, right? Because I don't think it would like he goes on, which is interesting enough. He goes on to write like, was it like Down with Big Brother, like over and over and over and over?
Yeah.
Right. He just zones out and just writes like a whole page of down with Big Brother, down with Big Brother.
It's weird because it's like his own subconscious. I don't know what it is, but what's interesting is he could have write bless Big Brother, and he probably still would have committed a crime. I don't think it's not the content of what he writes, but the fact, like you said, Melissa, the fact that he was thinking, the fact that he,
Expressing individuality.
yeah, whether good or bad. Because even look at Goldstein, right? Goldstein was the party ideal, and yet he's now the number one enemy because he was too good at following the rule, being the party ideal.
It's crazy.
And so he writes down. What do we think's going on with that there? The Down with Big Brother, because it seems like, as you said, like he didn't seem to really realize at the time that he's writing it.
Hmm.
What's going on there?
I think he just got to this point where he was frustrated because he was in that what was it that triggered it? It was in the movie theater or something?
It was the 2 minutes hate while he was at work. He like flashes back to while he was at work, and he saw the hot girl who's abstinent, which pisses him off, and he sees the big muscular dude who like works for the intelligence agency and always puts him on edge, and that pisses him off. And so yeah, I think you're right, Sarah. I think just like everything kind of piles up one day, and he's like, man, like this world's kind of shit. Like I'm tired of all of this terrible stuff going on. And so deep in his subconscious, as he was just zoning out with his pen, that thought kind of just materialized, down with Big Brother. Like, this is not the way the world is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it is. I think it was a subconscious. I mean, I don't think he was aware, because like, as I said, he wasn't aware of what he was writing.
Exactly.
And it makes me wonder, do other people within society, whether like, do they have the same unconscious like realizations, like such that like maybe they're not aware of it deep down, like they've kind of like built walls around the truth, right? Like they've blocked in the truth and they're not accessing it, but really deep down, is it there for everyone such that they can?
Well, and that's what we were talking about earlier in the lunchroom when his friend comes along. It's like, does everybody know that these are lies, but they're just terrified of getting unpersoned? So nobody says anything. They all just bite their tongue. Or are there these people who just have built up these walls of like, Big Brother knows what's best, Big Brother's going to take care of me, and they just believe, they double think, and even though they know it's not true, they take it at face value and they accept it as true because they have no other choice.
Yeah.
Yikes.
What do you guys think about the pneumatic tubes? Do you guys remember that? So within his work, there's the 3 tubes. The one that sends stuff to him, the middle tube goes down to the furnace, and then the third one is what he sends out.
I think it's a way to eliminate contact with other people. Less contact with other people, the less you can form groups and socialization. It's kind of like how everyone's expected to say comrades. Nobody's a friend. No one's everyone's just a colleague. There's no close personal relationship within the.
Yeah, it keeps you from having your boss come over and be like, "Hey, so we're gonna need you to fix this," and then
This
you
is
have
the
that
project
shared
I
moment.
need you to work on. Yeah.
Yeah, the shared moment of, I know it's not right, but you need to do this because
That's
this
true.
is
It's like
what we do.
isolation, right? The isolation prevents others from, like, it kind of keeps those questions, right, in Winston's mind of, do other people? Because he can't have that conversation with them, so
Well,
it's
and-
left in his mind. Like, do they have the same ideas? Or
Because you
Well,
can
and he
say
even
what
says
you need
as
to
he
say,
makes
but
eye
your
contact
face.
with he makes eye contact with the dude across the cubicle from him, and he's like, is he probably is working on the exact same thing I am.
yeah.
Well, and the pneumatic tubes, kind of like along the same lines of what Sarah was saying, I think removing the interpersonal, like human being aspect of communication and interaction and replacing it with just the idea of like Big Brother strengthens Big Brother's hold over society.
Yeah, because
So pneumatic tubes are just from Big Brother. Whereas like if a supervisor came that was an actual person with a face that you could look at, it would be a disconnect from the power that the government holds.
Yeah, it's hard to fight against a machine versus against a person.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I
that's,
thought it was neat to see also like the news speak versus what someone normally would have said.
Yeah,
It should have been written this way.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
translates it after he reads it. Yeah, when I first went over that, I was like, what does that say?
I know. Yeah.
and it's, yeah, because I didn't think about this before, but I think it's that interesting idea that, like, 'cause I never thought of the pneumatic tubes as like isolating people, but that probably is really what they're in some sense for, is to isolate people from other people. And it makes me wonder, maybe because like, again, with the facial expressions, all that, right? Every outward appearance, they have to put up the facade, whether they believe it or not, right? But now it makes me wonder, maybe other people actually all in some way are believing the same way that Winston does. Maybe Winston is just a blanket character for really every other person, at least up to this point in the book.
Right.
Every other person in the story, but no one will act on it because everyone's left with those questions of, what if I'm the only one? Maybe I'm the oddball because they can't talk about it. Every outward expression has to, fit within or you'll be killed.
Yeah.
And they're always being watched by the telescreens. There's no way to privately have a conversation with anybody.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Which is weird.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too, so in the pneumatic tubes, if I remember right, he doesn't write things, I don't think, right? Doesn't he speak into it?
It's like a dictation almost. Yeah.
Because that's kind of weird. That's a little different. What do we think's what's going on there?
to get rid of written language,
Mm-hmm.
if you can't read or write.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
If you can't read or write, it's harder to get a hold of books that might have not been destroyed and to pass along information, because really at this point it seems like the best way to get contact with someone else would be through writing paper, because that's the only thing the telescreens can't see, or
Right.
it's more difficult to do. And
Well,
or what Winston's doing, writing in the diary. If they can't read or write, they can't write in a diary to have these thoughts. If they have no place to express them, they can't form them properly.
Yeah, I think writing, like actually writing with a pen and paper, is to an extent a form of self-expression.
Yeah.
And I think that they're trying to limit that as much as possible. And he even says that when he dictates in Newspeak. So he's using these words, or he has to use replacements because words have been deleted. So like he's already doing that like future language, the 11th edition, trying to make everything as straightforward and unnuanced as possible.
Which is interesting. Yeah, it seems like language itself, like written language, right? And I think it's kind of like that. I don't remember how that quote goes, but it's like the idea that like a book, it's what is it? It's the idea of like it's books that change history, right? It's books that change ideas. It's the written word, right? That ability to express, like you said, express oneself. You get rid of that, because all the speaking, right? It's not like he could take a secret written.
Well,
If he was writing, he could almost do like a secret.
Yeah,
they mentioned that there's a people with their job is to collect all the books and all the stuff that's been considered outdated or that needs to be
Incorrect.
changed.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is written word.
Yeah, but very controlled, I think, right? Like it's even the written has to align with the party idea.
Well, and I'm sure that, because this has been going on for 30, 40 years now, the English socialist government has taken over at this point in the novel.
Mhm.
I'm sure that most of the books, and I think it talks about this, have been changed and censored to fit party ideals. So like you could read To Kill a Mockingbird, but it's going to be very, very vastly different from what To Kill a Mockingbird actually originally was.
Mm-hmm.
True. What do we think of that middle tube? So that middle tube sends everything down to the furnace.
Just disintegrates the old version of the past.
Yeah. So it's not just a throwing away, right? It's a destroying of the past. It's
Completely obliterating, the old past.
Yeah.
Or is it? We don't.
Yeah. Right. Maybe. Yeah. Like right at this point, like it was,
I have the same thought. Yeah, like what if they just tell them, oh, that one goes to the furnace where we obliterate the past. And maybe they're doing other stuff with what the original historical record was.
And that's a good point because it seems to imply that no one's seen it, or at least no one around like that he knows of, right? It talks about he just says it's somewhere in the depths, right? Or somewhere down below. But he's never been there. No one that he knows, as far as we know, has been there.
Right. And I don't think
ignorance is strength. You don't know. You think you're doing what you need to do.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, I don't think it goes against the theme of the story at all to say that maybe people lied to him about the way things work.
True.
It kind of reminds me of The Giver, if you guys have read The Giver.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Have you?
Yeah.
Where they think they're releasing them into some other, whatever. And yeah, they're not. But anyway.
Exactly.
You're gonna wake up, aren't you?
Let's see. Okay. Did you guys have any other? I didn't necessarily have anything more like content wise. Did you guys have any pieces of content?
I have the book on my phone, so I'm gonna go peek. I highlighted a couple of things that I wanted to talk about.
Let's see if I can pull them up. While you're doing that, one thing I kind of want to maybe put on is the literary style of the book, because I think you brought up a good point. I think it was Melissa, I think, that said it like that. It's kind of dry to read, right? At the beginning, it's kind of like
in the beginning.
Like in a lot of parts of it, he gives a lot of detail, and I'm kind of like, I don't need it. What I'm curious is, and I don't know if this is the case or not, but I'm wondering if in some sense it's meant to be the case, insofar as it gets us to feel probably in some way the same way that Winston would feel about life, right? It's boring, it's monotonous, and it's just the only thing that you really know, right? The details. It's just like, oh, this and this and this. This is here. This is that. This is that. This is that.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, without the technology that we have now, like, would we just be sitting here staring at the wall, thinking about the texture of it and how, it kind of slopes this way and then it moves that way, and you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe that's just the descriptive times because that's the little things they noticed. So they talk about it.
And it's like, it just seems so like, dreary to like read, like even to read it, right? Like at least those first few, it's just, oh man, like this is like really slow and like it's just.
Yeah.
But the more I don't know, think about it, the more I'm thinking, I think that might have been because it really kind of, that's what Winston's life,
Deliberate.
yeah, his life is just that, his whole life.
Yeah. Well, and part of the reason that I think it was deliberate is because when you get to the parts where he is committing thought crimes or like he is doing a little bit of double thinking and like he's kind of questioning it, like me personally, like my heart rate picks up a little bit because you're so used to like the boring monotonous of like he's talking about his work, he's talking about eating lunch with his friends from work and this, that, and the other, that like when he sits down to write in the diary and talks about how dangerous it is and how he's not supposed to be doing it, like you as a reader can almost perceptibly feel the shift in the tone of the book from this boring, monotonous, everyday life in the party to committing thought crime and like doing things you're not supposed to be doing. And I think it makes for like a more riveting read.
Yeah, that's true. It is a pretty big shift. Like it's like we're in there kind of like a spark, right? That happens in him, and then we see kind of a shift even in the way that it's
as the story's told.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you're right, Cole. I think it might have been deliberate, which now that you mention it, yeah, makes for a better story.
Yeah, kind of cool now, right? Like when I'm reading it, when I was like, oh, it's kind of dry. But now I look back like, oh, it's, it's not in, it's interesting because I just finished the book called The Things They Carried. You guys ever read that? Yeah.
I don't think so.
It was good. So it's long story short, it's a story about Vietnam. But the thing is, it's a fiction book, but a lot of it's true. But he doesn't tell you what's true because the purpose of the book is to give what he calls story truth. He doesn't care about the factual details. He cares about getting you to feel the same way that a soldier in Vietnam would feel. He wants you to feel the emotions.
That makes sense.
If something similar was happening here, at least in the first, getting you to feel what somebody in that society would actually feel like.
Makes sense.
So this book, as you were kind of, I think, Sarah, you were pointing out, like, right, the timeliness of when this book was written, socialism was on the rise, right? And it's this big threat within society. Is this book anti-socialist propaganda?
Yes. It was written as anti-socialist propaganda.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that the main idea of the book is to think critically, to question why things are the way that they are, and whether or not they could be improved or changed for whatever you or your common man thinks better is. And in highlighting that, like, there's this concrete world where you have to do whatever you're told to do, and if you don't exist in this world anymore. It's that, like, extreme, intense possibility, and watching a character think critically through all of that sort of inspires you. That's like, if he can think critically in that kind of world, like, I should definitely be able to apply critical thinking to this world that I live in that's much less severe and, like, intense than 1984.
Yeah. Melissa, what do you think?
I don't know. It seems. I think Mitch has it pretty well said. Yeah. Sorry,
I actually tend to agree somewhat with Sarah. Like, I think in some sense it is anti-social.
A little more. Yeah.
Like,
I think definitely given the time that it was written in, it could 100% be interpreted that way. Absolutely.
Some implication here might be such that to think for yourself is to not be a socialist. So if you don't, it's kind of this reverse catch-all, right? Such that going, hey, this party doesn't equal anything, but here's the good things that we want. But I'm wondering, and I think time will tell as we read through the book, because we're only 5 chapters in, is this trying to paint a picture of a certain of socialism such that, hey, this is what socialism leads to. And I don't know if it's the case because I don't really remember this book at all. So I need to finish reading it. But I think we see that within society, right? We see mischaracterizations of different, like, communism, socialism, all these different ideologies, right? Like, people hear the word communism and it's like they revolt, right? It's just this like, ugh. But then you ask them, well, what does communism hold? Hitler, evil,
right.
All
it's like
that.
we were talking earlier with the indoctrination. Like, you grow up in a society where everyone thinks that communism is bad. We don't know why they think that, but you just agree.
Yeah, like, because like, again, this book is used in high school. Like, I read it in high school. I'm curious, and I don't really remember, but I'm curious if this book is used as a way to be anti-socialist. Not to tell you, because like people, because I don't know if extreme form of socialism, right? Like this is like socialism taken all the way.
All the way to 110% cranked up to 11.
Because like I'm not a socialist by any means, but I can recognize that in our book too, this isn't what any general idea of socialism would be accepted as. So I'm curious, you know, like, and I don't know if that's something we even have access to. Like, I'm just curious how in schools, how is this used, right? Like, why do schools choose this book, you know, for?
Yeah, it's almost like they're showing you this like propaganda about how terrible socialism is in order to indoctrinate you into the belief that socialism is really, really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I could definitely.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, dude.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One other point I want to point out. So we had the war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. So that if that's the slogan for them, right? We already said like Pledge of Allegiance, right? We have that. What other slogan do we see within American culture? Something of that same form do we have? Something about inalienable rights.
Oh, the Constitution.
Yeah, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And the pursuit of happiness. Yeah.
We have these ideals, and that generally seems to be what we build our country on, right?
Yeah, we the people of the United States hold these truths to be self-evident. Like they're real, and there's nothing you can do to dispute that.
Yeah. But every human being, right, has these ideas of life, liberty, which are good things, right? I'm not going to go and say life, liberty, but I'm curious. Let's contrast that with just this INGSOC, right? So this in our book, the Socialist Nation. What do you think they would have to say about these ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?
Do not kick your dad. He will kick you.
They would not like it.
Yeah, right. At least that's
At all.
Need it, right? They'd be like, no, that's
He
everything.
needs to be happy.
Well, and even just like the whole all men are created equal. They would be like, not the Eurasians, not the East Asians. They're not created the same as us. Nope. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
But like, that's indoctrinated into our American beliefs is that the four of us, as we all sit and stand here right now, are on a level playing field.
See, but it hasn't always been that way, even in America. We've
true.
always had, right? The Constitution's been around a lot longer than, or is a lot older than the abolition of slavery.
Or even like women's suffrage.
Yeah.
It even flat out says in the Constitution, all men are created equal.
Yeah. And the thing is, like with African Americans, right? They would redefine. Well, they how would they escape it? Often they say, oh, well, they are subhuman, right? They're not quite human, so therefore
They're not quite men.
the rights. Exactly. Which is interesting. Like it's interesting to just see even within our same tactics that they use, right? We apply these terms, but then they redefine it to match something else. Because even INGSOC, or like the Socialist Party in our book, they may either just deny life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, or they would just go on to redefine it, right? Life for the party, liberty in the way that they define justice, right? And then
slavery is freedom.
happiness is serving Big Brother. You know?
Or like Melissa said, like, you don't have to think. If Big Brother tells you what to do, then like your life is so easy. You just do whatever you're told. You follow this routine. That is liberty. That's freedom. You have nothing to worry about, even though it's not.
Yeah.
They redefine it and they make it whatever they want it to be.
Yeah. And I'm not making a claim here or by any means, but it very like that's another thing within our own society we may want to question. We have these ideals of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Are these being upheld?
Do you think like our own military, like my husband was in the Air Force for like 14 years, and you know, they do tell you what to think, they do tell you what to do. It's kind of like this society in a sense, you know.
Yeah, like a subculture.
Yeah, and like you're told, you know, this person is the bad guy and this is what we need to do to fix this situation, and you know, they insert themselves in countries, and you know, there is basically no freedom. You can't say what you want to say on social media.
You do what you're told when you're told with no questions asked.
no questions asked. It's kind of the same. Yeah, because your opinion can be construed to be the opinion of the government. So you got to watch what you say. And yeah, I don't know. That came to mind just because he was in the Air Force for so long. But
I think that's that's actually a really interesting like idea. And actually, if we can, like, let's explore that a little bit further. Like, what do we think of that? Is that appropriate for the military?
well, I mean, the whole war is peace thing, think that kind of fits in with, a military standpoint, they're creating peace by having war. Um, the ignorance is strength. Maybe they only tell them so much that gets them to
Follow
have
orders
to
more.
follow and show their strength because
Mhm.
they're ignorant to maybe the bigger picture, or they just get a small glimpse of what they need to know. And what was
Yeah,
the other thing?
slavery is freedom, which
Slavery is
just
freedom.
do exactly what the government or the military tells you, no matter what. Like,
Yeah,
be here at this time, dress the way we tell you to dress. Slavery
right,
is freedom.
right. And if you don't show up, it's you can be imprisoned, and you can
Yeah,
it's a
they're
big deal.
super strict.
Order,
Yeah,
right? You can get court-martialed for that.
yeah. Non-judiciary punishment. People get sent to the brig for all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, it's a really strict, different like culture and society from like real life, like normal American civilian life. Well, and I
But
was
it's the
thinking
only
with the
thing I
whole,
can think of that coincides with some of the themes of the book. Because
I mean,
in a sense, Big Brother is always listening to military, and you're listening to other people maybe speak against something, and then they're told on the spies within the military community. And even what I would do would reflect on my husband. And if I did something, even on social media, it could be reported, and Dan would have to go in front of the commander because of something I did.
Wow.
It was crazy. Yeah.
Because I'm curious, like, in times of like, because my always like growing up, like, because I wanted to go into the military for a long time. My concern though, or my like worry, and even like today, like, if what would I do if I was commanded to do something I thought was morally wrong?
Mhm.
In case
do it.
You'd have to
The
do it.
military would seem like they'd
You
want
do it or pay
All
very,
order.
very severe consequences. Yeah. And I mean, it's a type
Yeah,
of
going
indoctrination.
against the orders of your commanding officer. Like,
And in
it's
some
not.
sense it makes sense, right? Because it's like you can't have indifference in times of like war, because every moment matters. Like, no, if I give you order, you do it. Think
Well, and it's
act
kind of like that ignorance is strength thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, if you know enough about the situation that you are able to think critically and question, like, why does my general want me to do this, or why is the enemy doing that, then you're going to hesitate. These soldiers, these Marines, these airmen are not going to pull the trigger. They're not going to want to drop those bombs if they are contemplating who these other people actually are, like, from a human standpoint. And
And they use
so you have to be
propaganda,
ignorant.
and they use propaganda throughout the whole training.
Intense
military.
propaganda.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
to get you to get to the mindset of where you need to be to do the things you need to do.
So we're gonna come back. I want to come back to this here in just one second, but to
Cool.
ask a question that goes back to our book, kind of related to this. Do you think that people within our book, right? Everyone within like his the different ministries, are they themselves responsible for, like, let's say you're on the thought police, right? Are the people on the thought police responsible for killing other people? They're following orders, right? Do they hold a moral responsibility for that?
Hmm.
What do
I
you
want to say no, because of the like complete indoctrination that this society and this culture has. Like, I just don't think any of them stand a chance. You're not taught to think critically. You're not taught to question why things are the way that they are. You're just taught to do what you're told when you're told to do it without any second thought.
Mhm.
It doesn't
So
sound like you have much compassion for their fellow person. It's more about the system in place and we got to protect the system and, I don't know.
So,
Or it's like they're never taught compassion. They don't know
Well-
what it is. Or they redefine compassion and teach them something totally different.
It's love to tell on.
true. And so to go back to our example then of the military, right? Do we think then that military soldiers following orders, whether they think it's morally right or wrong, or whether it is morally right or wrong, are they responsible for those actions? Should they be morally either praised or reprehensible for those?
Hard one.
The most extreme case of that would be Nazism. Do you hold the Nazis responsible for what happened to the Jewish people?
That's the next question.
Or do you hold solely
Or were they just
Hitler?
indoctrinated and like they didn't stand a chance?
Well, that's the thing, because the Nazis running Auschwitz, right? Those running the gas chambers. The argument against, or like often has, how could you do that? How could they do something so inhuman, right? Well, in reality, their response is oftentimes is, I was just following orders, right? I was just doing what I was told to do. And
Well,
so-
and like,
but we hold them accountable for it. We hold individuals accountable, right? We put them in prison.
Yeah.
They get hanged or whatever it was. Is that right? Should individuals be held responsible for their own actions, even in light of commands, right? So if your command something,
I
is
just
it
don't know if
for the individual.
I just don't know if being indoctrinated is your own fault. Like the whole point of military boot camp all over the world and including in America is to like strip you of your sense of individualism and rebuild you as someone who does what you're told when you're told to do it without asking questions. That's what
Sort of
they
use
want.
it.
That's what their goal is, to make you that way. And so like if they succeed in making you a killing machine who just does whatever you're told, is that your fault? Like if you were indoctrinated, if the propaganda worked on you,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. These are good questions.
It's like not knowing who was on that SEAL Team 6 or whatever, and there's a reason why we don't know their individual names, and it's so that they're not, it's so they're not victimized for what they were told to do and what they had to do, or,
Right.
yeah.
Because it's not like this was just a bunch of dudes who were like, let's go kill Osama bin Laden, guys. We can do it. Like, that somebody somewhere had information and told them that they had to go do it. And they just went, okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask a further question on this. Do you think individuals or like nations are responsible for military action? So in terms of like, right, so like I'm thinking like in terms of court too, like should individuals be held accountable for those actions? Or should it just be the government? Whatever that looks like.
I think the way that it stands today, it's more on the government than it is on the individuals.
But what do you think about it though? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree?
I don't know, man. 'cause
The only
it's like-
time someone
Go
I
ahead,
think the only
Nolan.
time someone gets in trouble is if they go beyond what they were ordered to do and, go a step out of line or a step further. And that's the only time you ever hear about it as
Well,
an
what's the
individual,
order?
what they did wrong.
If the command was evil? What if the order itself was to do something like put Jews in a gas tank, right? And gas them.
And the problem is that because they were indoctrinated and because the propaganda worked, they believe that the Jews are the evil ones. And they're like, oh, we have to get them. We have to kill them. They're going to hurt us. They're going to change the world that we live in, and we don't want them.
Yeah.
And so they think they're doing the right thing.
I think it also comes down to, did you volunteer to be part of this group that's doing these evil things? Like, did you enlist to do this, or were you, drafted
Right.
and now you're doing what you have to do just to get by? I mean, I don't know.
Would
It
that,
also-
for you, would that change like how, like, so would you say like then the enlisted are responsible, but those that are drafted?
You're right. I don't
I'm
know.
just curious, where like, where would you land there?
I was just following orders. That's a heavy cross to bear, because it's like you're giving up your sense of individuality for what you believe to hopefully maybe be the greater good. And the only reason you believe that is because it's your military in the country that you grew up in. So you're like, since I was born here, these guys are right. And since you were born
And
there,
also-
you believe that they were right.
There's also consequences if you don't do what you're told to do. Even, you know, you don't want to be the victim, become the victim as well. So a lot of people will do what they have to do to stay on the side that's not being victimized, you know?
That's just like in 1984. Like, he can see that these things are wrong and he doesn't like it and he doesn't want to do it. But if he speaks out against it or tries to fight back, he'll be dead.
Right.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know, because it's like, I just feel like if we're teaching people to act a certain way, then like when they do it, we shouldn't hold them at fault for that. Like, if the government's job is to rebuild people to follow orders and be killing machines, and then these people go out and they follow orders and they're killing machines, like, I just don't know if it's their fault.
You know what's interesting though? If we say that, we have to claim the same thing that the Ministry of Love claims, that the ministry gets to define justice. And in this case, the U.S.
military
government, right? They get to define what is justice,
what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, maybe you want to accept that, but maybe there's issues that come with that too, right? Because if that's the case, maybe we would say that the Ministry of Love is in 1984 is, I mean, that's the way it should be.
Individuality versus government control. An age-old question.
The question is just the responsibility, right? Who's responsible for one's actions, whether they're commanded or not, right? Is it are we going to apply that to individuals, or are we going to apply that to like entities? And we could do it even outside the military, right? Like, look at the bank crisis, right? The bank bailout. Is it because I think probably most of you know, like, corporations, right? They're called persons, right? Such that a corporation has personhood, what our government says, such that when we talk about corporate responsibility, it's this person that is the corporation that's held responsible, not individuals. It's the entity, which is interesting. And then we don't probably don't have time here, but that'd be another question to think through. Like, is that right or is that wrong? So like when and here's probably one that will really happen. So there's news reports coming out that certain senators gave inside info about this corona outbreak to certain
They knew the market was going to trash, so they dumped all their stock.
They shorted their own stock. That's illegal.
Insider trading.
Right, it is. And so if they become persecuted for that, oftentimes the individuals, the ones that actually made a profit, they're not at risk at all, because they'll just tank the corporation. It's the person that is the corporation that's going to be held responsible and taken to court, not the president, not the CEO, none of them. If that's the case, is that justice? You know, but we don't have to go into that, but just another way that you could see this dilemma working out. But
I think at the end of the day, both parties need to take responsibility. And if you don't have both parties taking responsibility, you're going to end up in a situation like 1984 or where you have Germany.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, right? And maybe it's not a either or situation. Maybe it's a both and. You know, so
that's an intriguing topic. My roommate was in the Marine Corps, and like he's at work right now. But I'm gonna ask him when he gets home. I'm gonna be like, "How would you feel if somebody gave you an order that like you didn't agree with?"
Yeah.
Because I mean, he was indoctrinated. You know what I mean? He went through the training. He was in the Marines for 5 years. Like, they turned him into one of them. And it's hard to wonder, man. Like, what would you do if somebody told you to do something you weren't supposed to or you didn't want to?
Right.
Well, like Dan, my husband, he had to get all these shots too. He had to get like the smallpox vaccination, whether he wanted it or not. And then down the line, he was supposed to go to some country and they didn't have the paperwork on him showing he had already gotten these shots. So he had to get them all again.
That checks out.
in that moment, whether he had it or not. And it's no choice. And it's sorry, you're going to this country because we want you to go to this country, and you have to get all this stuff done to yourself, whether you want to or not. No choice. It's crazy all the freedom, that they're taking away while
Well,
you're
slavery is
pursuing
so you
freedom.
never have to worry about these diseases because we are going to force you to get vaccinated. You will
Of
never
course
get
you-
sick. Slavery is freedom. You do what we say, and then your life is better.
Right.
It's dark. It's really, it's concerning how many parallels can be drawn from what is like arguably the archetypal dystopian future book and the world that we live in today right now.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
true. That's true.
Do we know how many chapters are in this book?
I can probably tell you right now. Let's check. Let's see.
I just wondered, like, at what point the next chunk that you guys
Yeah, how many we should do before our next meeting?
Yeah.
Did anyone struggle getting through all the reading this time, or were
What was that?
enough time? Was it enough time for everyone to get through 5 chapters, or were we struggling?
I didn't have a problem. Yeah, I did all right.
And honestly, like Melissa and I had much more time than you guys. We kind of started, we had.
Well,
That doesn't mean that we necessarily read it. Like, well, Melissa didn't read it until recently.
I read it this afternoon. I had to read it this afternoon. I'll find that I wasted the whole day, and a lot of it I realize I'm wasting on my phone, on Facebook, looking at things, looking at
I
Instagram.
deleted Facebook, and so my next step is going to be to delete Twitter, because all the time I was spending on Facebook, I now just spend on Twitter.
Well, it's where
But,
I'm
like-
learning like all this stuff that I didn't know about. Because if I didn't get on Facebook, I wouldn't know half the shit that's going on right now.
People spreading news, sharing articles, stuff like that.
Yeah, like about the whole like is it San Francisco or Sacramento? I think it is, and
Sacramento,
how
I
they're
think,
like locked down and all that stuff. Like I just wouldn't even know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I guess that wouldn't count it as doing nothing then, because you're just trying to stay informed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just look at it too much.
I feel that. Yeah, I definitely know what you mean.
So I'll spend like 20 minutes on Facebook, and then I'll go over to Instagram. Oh, surely some new stuff's on Facebook now, so I'll
And
go
you
back
just
to
circle.
Facebook.
Yeah, it's just like the same 3 or 4 applications that I just cycle through over and over again until the sun goes
Yeah.
down and I fall back asleep.
Yeah. Whereas my husband's like, you could take this time to paint this room, you could paint that room, and I'm like, but I wanna do this and I wanna do that, and then I don't do any of this or that. I just waste my day.
I feel that. Cole, did you figure out how many chapters there are?
So it's broken into 3 parts. So like we're in this part, so we have 6, 7, and 8 left, which really isn't that many pages from what it looks like here. And then part 2 starts, and let's see. So part 2 is going to be a little bit longer than what so it's up to you guys. Like, we could just break this down and do like, we can read part 2. That's gonna be a lot more reading though for you guys. I don't know, again, how you guys balance reading or how often you want to do it, but I can do any.
Should we just
Yeah, I
all
mean-
get through part 2 then? Or like finish part 2 and then reconvene?
We want to read all of part 2?
You could, or I don't care. We could do half of it. It don't matter to me.
Yeah, cool, because we still have 6, 7, and 8 to go in part 1. And then, yeah, do you want to do like the first half of part 2?
Why don't we
What
do
is that? Like up to
remaining
like 12?
part 1 up through chapter 4 of part 2. Does that sound
Chapter 4 of part 2. Okay. So
So
Because
read
that's-
chapter 4 and then stop.
Yeah, and then that'd be about the halfway mark to part 3.
Part
Well,
3. Okay,
I
cool.
find that having a day to read this by is helpful because then I know I need to get it done. So what day works for you guys? What day do you want to have this
You want
done?
to do Friday again? A week?
As I say, as of right now, like my schedule's pretty open. So yeah, Friday.
Okay.
Friday at 2:30?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, my dog
You're pretending. You're pretending.
Your voice is, I think you cut out.
doing well.
You're
What'd you say?
pretending.
We couldn't hear you.
Oh, I said my dog's getting antsy, so I have to take her out. But
Okay,
thank you
sounds good.
guys for the
Yeah.
chat and the book club.
Yeah,
I miss you.
it's
I hope
fun.
everybody's doing well.
If you guys know of anyone else that would like to join, Let's
For
not.
sure. Yeah, honestly, we might have to mention it.
Hey, Cole, and thank you so much for like having a plan and questions. Like I
Leading
feel
the
like you really
discussion.
did great.
I love
Yeah.
the
Professor Smith.
fun. I enjoy it. So Thor might next time. So
Exactly. All right, guys, take care. So we're reading all the way up through chapter 4 in part
yeah,
2.
through chapter 4. Yeah.
So read
Okay.
chapter 4.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Sounds good. I'll see you guys in a week.
Awesome.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.